No law ever written is as powerful as cold steel.
After escaping Butcher Bay, Riddick is off to his next stabby adventure, and it's still a prequel to Pitch Black. However, there's a lot of different context going in this time. Butcher Bay was part of a big multimedia push for the Chronicles of Riddick movie. I mean, just going from Pitch Black to that, they're clearly in a different world of budget. Even though it later got a cult following, the movie was a financial disappointment. So for 7th gen consoles, the original idea was to remake Butcher Bay. But to sweeten the deal, it would also include multiplayer and a new campaign chapter called Dark Athena. But the year it was supposed to come out, the game's publisher was absorbed into Activision Blizzard. They dropped the game for not fitting into their portfolio. The game was then picked up by Atari of all things, and the game came out a year and a half after the original launch date. In the meantime, Starbreeze had quietly kept working, and they now had enough in the game that they felt they could sell it as a sequel. So the project became Assault on Dark Athena, with the remake now being a bonus. So, kind of a Riddick ODST situation. That shiny new engine came with a very shiny new campaign. But like Butcher Bay, there's apparently some kind of witch curse to running the thing. Sure, it's not as scuffed as Butcher Bay, but that'd be like saying your neighbor's not as weird as Jeffrey Dahmer. Like, sure, this seems better, but I still might end up in the refrigerator. So here's what's new. There's no Securom this time, but there is Tages. And this one was extra insane. Basically, if you installed it for the 3rd time, you would only be able to install it again after a 30-day timer. Which might not sound too bad, unless it thinks swapping out a PC part counts as a new install, or we're struggling to get it working so reinstall it a few times, or it bugs out and activates again for no reason, and then maybe the company goes defunct and you can't activate the stupid thing anymore. The GOG version ripped that stupid shit out, but again, it's currently delisted. But let's say you got that copy before that happened, or you found one. It might not launch unless you put the entire install instead of a redundant folder. Only some copies do that, I don't know why. Alright, then you go to launch it and, oh, it won't go. How mysterious. This is because your PC might have flagged a DLL file. It thinks it's the Murder Machine Obfuscator XZ Ultra. It thinks it'll fill your computer with rabies, but it's probably fine. I just went ahead and restored that. There we go. Nice and running on the same machine I keep my taxes on. Maybe I'm part of a botnet, but at least I have my edgelord game.
You want to survive or be a victim? Make a choice.
The only reason to...
So once you're actually in the game, it's mainly smooth sailing. But if you think the menu cube looks slightly glossier than the old one, well, the entire game is like this. Everything you'll be seeing is without post-processing. But if it still looks too clear to you, you can add motion blur and depth of field on top of that. As a bonus, enabling that will randomly drop the frame rate. But still, you don't have to monkey with the thing while it's running, which is nice. That done, let's see where the game kicks off after Butcher Bay.
They say hope begins in the dark, but most just flail around in the blackness, searching for their destiny. The darkness, for me, is where I shine.
It's a surreal opening level, especially compared to Butcher Bay. Waking up on a beach in a strange world, no sign of Johns, the ship, or anything really. The most information you get is from a crazed man who survived something. Everyone he knows has been killed or swiped away.
I think they killed my family. Some kind of gas. My daughter. She was just lying there, and they took her. Oh, God. Oh.
And immediately you complain to Riddick not caring, or make him more compassionate.
The gas isn't lethal. I am.
Look, we're on the Riddick scale here. He doesn't commentate his way through the tutorial like he did in Butcher Bay, which is another sign of it being a glorified expansion. But what little Riddick does say in the opening still gives you a good idea of who he is as a character. Just in case someone was playing this before the remake campaign. But as a follow-up, it is a weirdly quiet opening. Like if you played this back to back, the last thing you saw was Hoxie getting the RoboCop special, while meanwhile, Johns and Riddick are riding off into the sunset with adventure music. You've gone from that to Punch-Out with some bizarre mercenaries. And they're helpers. And before you can remotely understand what's happening, it's all over. It was another dream tutorial, but this one had a lot more intrigue.
embrace the darkness.
Let's start over. After escaping Exhibit's exhibit, their ship drifted through the Iguaran system, a home to outcasts and asteroid collisions, along with the Dark Athena, a mercenary ship that's revealed to you in the same way you'd find a centipede underneath a rock. At first glance, you could write it off as just being a strange-looking salvaging ship, but by the way it harpoons you in and then starts fondling the ship with insect claws, it's clear that the bad dream tone of the tutorial will be sticking around. You're not just being boarded, your ship is being consumed by a giant space bug, which is just so visually interesting when someone could have written down that they just cut through a doorway or something. To be fair, that does still happen, but they also send in a drone to gas Johns. It's this kind of creativity the franchise is great for. It's a weird setting, with bizarre technology at times, but everyone still talks in a modern, matter-of-fact way about all of it. It helps keep you grounded even as things just keep getting stranger.
Ah, Johns. I remember you. Squad leader on Sol Lucia, I believe. Good man once, but not anymore. You do know that the Bay's been looking for you.
Yeah, Johns didn't make a subtle getaway.
And your friend. What have you done with him?
This bit here is great too.
Good to go, Cap? Anything worth salvaging?
Why are you bothering me?
They framed it like he was talking to her, and then she pulls out her communicator. She is barely paying attention to this BDSM Borg. She is Captain Revis and eager to collect her bounties. Naturally, like most of these types, Riddick already knows her.
I knew Revis was a survivor. Now, she was a hunter.
Back-to-back escape plans. But where Butcher Bay was a triple max prison, you don't know exactly what the Dark Athena is or what it's doing out here. You just happen to coast to the wrong area and were easy prey. It's you alone versus DIY Strogg, Dark Eldar cosplayers, and some fairly normal-looking dudes. But for starters, let's address the glowing elephant in the room, because it does feel like something is happening to my eyeballs.
How long do I do this for Riddick eyes?
Anyways, compared to how sharp and clear things looked, this is a departure, but there's a few things at play here. You are aboard an odd spaceship, one that's parked in a faraway system above an alien world. This isn't new, Pitch Black could have some extreme color changes, but these were scenes that didn't stretch out for hours like the game does. So you could use that to explain part of it away, but like I said before, if you play the remake, it all looks like this. They cranked up the bloom, it's desaturated, it looks like a lot of other shooters at the time. If it was just that, I'd still prefer the original, it'd be different but fine. It's everything else on top of this. Light and shadow is still important, but this time around it's much more of a shooter. When it gets too dark you can still pull out your eye shine, but now it looks way worse. Not just in the bright areas, which would still make sense, but even in darkness the screen is covered in strands of light and blurring. If you've ever wondered what post-LASIK is like, it actually kind of looks like this. This could be hard to see with YouTube compression, but your entire screen is covered by a faint eyeball, iris and all. The effect is that you don't have Riddick vision anymore. You now have the untreated parasite living in Riddick's eye vision. Plus, when the entire game is already desaturated and has weird color correction, the power doesn't feel as distinct as it used to be. Part of that is because there's a second eye shine. When the game thinks it's too dark, it'll automatically start tinting the screen and brightening things up. It is insane how sensitive the game is to this. You can step into a dark corner for a moment, eye shine on. It is pretty dark in there, so how about going down a tiny hallway while staring at a light? Eye shine on. A path in daylight where you go into some shade will activate the auto eye shine. I get that it's supposed to tell you when you're in shadows, but it's so disrupting. Oh, an enemy with a flashlight. I should turn that off and then it turns partially back on. To add insult to injury, the automatic one is a lot clearer than the one you activate, where any light bouncing off a surface sends you to specular highlight hell. If I was Riddick, I would be legitimately wondering if Pope Joe sabotaged me. And you never want to hear the word sabotage in a spaceship unless it's coming from the Beastie Boys. There are tons of dark environments, but you can't control your perception of them anymore. You basically get to choose between blur intensities, and then you're at the mercy of the game for things to remain static. Which sucks because the health bar turning blue would be perfectly fine. Like, okay, I see that, I'm in shadows now. But instead it works in a way where what shadows trigger it feels random. It makes parts of the game feel disorienting and frustrating in a way they weren't before. You still had to be selective using it, and it was clear what situations you shouldn't. So losing that agency for the game to try and do it for you when it thinks it should, that feels like a huge step down. It sucks because this is smeared over the entire game, but there were a ton of visual improvements too. All the character models and animation have way more detail. The facial animation, and especially lip syncing, is a huge upgrade. Where models once slid around or snapped into place for animations, I never saw that happen here. Nearly everything animation-wise looks and feels smoother to play. All your movement is slightly quicker, you can zoom in with weapons, and the game's environments still have that great attention to detail. When you can see the game clearly, it can still look great. And like the opening showed, they're still fantastic at making their setting interesting. A good example would be the ghost drones.
Did anyone check the vent? The fuck crawls through a vent. Check out the motherfucker!
For a ship this big, there's a relatively smaller number of crew. The mercenaries have been able to boost their numbers by using drones. Rather than shelling out for a robot, humans or humanoids can be converted into these things. The victim needs to be alive during the start of the process, but by the end, it does kill them. So most of the Dark Athena is full of shambling cyborg corpses, and their heart and lungs are just being pumped by batteries. So they sound like both a dying animal and a life support machine. They're also not the brightest. They're mainly used for menial jobs like moving cargo or patrolling areas the crew doesn't want to go into. They're basically using the settings equivalent of a Raspberry Pi to hijack the human body, so they can do simple tasks, but slowly and not very effectively. Even their guns are directly attached to their body. They have these big industrial tubes sticking out like it might be venting heat from the gun back into the body or something. It's like they're the ultimate expendable soldiers. They'll be at tasks endlessly until their body starts physically rotting away, and then they'll just get a new one. They're cheap to make, and they have dedicated people doing it all day. But the drones also come with a bonus feature.
There's no sign of the little kid.
The drones can be remotely piloted by crew members. So if a section they're patrolling suddenly gets loud, there's a chance a merc might assume direct control. And then they're moving way faster, taking cover, tactically reloading. They're being puppeted by a smarter enemy who also knows they're in no danger. You could be slicing their throats out and you'll hear them laugh it off or just taunt you because they know they can jump into another one.
Bring it on!
Which, one, adds context for using the same voice actors sometimes, and it's surreal hearing someone talking out of someone else's corpse while the corpse is still breathing.
Oh, damn, I forgot to put out some food for her. Stupid. Ah, she's fine. No worries. Testing. Hello. La-di-da. Freaky.
There's an undead cyborg, and the handler forgot to feed his cat. It feels like fighting a hive mind at times, and there's a definite insect theme going on visually. The look of the Dark Athena, the nanomed stations look like millipede carapaces or something. The drones have 8 eyes like a spider, and later they outright start using spider robots. Though they're also tiny cheap ones and not giant spiders. Again, they're not using fancy undead cyborgs. Still, the imagery for this is everywhere. It's like the ship and everything in it is a big bug colony. They go from planet to planet harvesting people to sustain themselves and increase their numbers. Apparently, before Revis took over, the Dark Athena was called the Locust. The mercenaries could have just been generic space pirates, which they do look and sound like sometimes, but they are elevated by that unique art direction. Thankfully, they didn't listen to people like that guy in the comments who already typed out that spiders aren't insects. When it comes to creepy video game spaceships, they had great ideas here, and while partially buried under some stupid filters, it's still technically impressive. Like the big mirror bathroom that you could have fights in. They were making multiplayer anyways, so those third-person animations were gonna go in. It is nice that the location is such a departure from Butcher Bay, and while there are some similar elements, they physically don't look like a retread, which would have been more understandable when this was originally an expansion. The sound is another area that had a lot of improvements, and also some trade-offs. The voice acting and direction is even better than before, without the mixing issues it could have, where it sounded like Vin Diesel was whispering into your ear, as the Iron Giant. Everyone did great, and especially the main cast. Where you once had Ron Perlman with the escape plan trying to outgruff Vin Diesel, now it's Lance Henriksen.
They're renegades, most likely. I've dealt with mercenaries before, and never have I met anyone like these assholes.
Throughout it all, Riddick's delivery is as perfect and hilarious as ever. Like when he finds a little girl hiding in the vent system.
The monsters. They'll catch me.
Now the monsters have something to fear.
After he makes sure to impress the small girl, he meets her imprisoned mother, who's of course frantic about where her child is like a good mom would be. So how does he say her daughter's not dead?
The dark protects her.
Oh, thank you, God. Thank you.
This is what I'm here for. Another benefit of coming out after Chronicles is that the composer had a better idea of the soundtrack. It's a lot more percussion heavy and sometimes leans into industrial or electronic sounds. Butcher Bay's was good, but for this campaign, it's a lot more fitting. Honestly, this feels like one of the biggest improvements the game makes. It's more faithful to the movie, the characters, and the situation. The mix of feral, caveman brain drums, but there's some grander, more dramatic tones underneath it. With Riddick's new Fury and Chosen One origin, that's perfect for who he is. Or the drone mile being this pulsing electronic music, but there are bits of these horror strings and tones that creep in and out of it. Sure, it's cool cyberpunk technology, it's also a fucking nightmare. That said, the step down was in some sound effects, and especially the propagation. It's still layered and extremely good, but the sounds of some weapons aren't what they used to be. Everything's pushed a little more to the middle compared to the higher range it used to have. You didn't always have a gun in Butcher Bay, but when you did, that sound had some weight to it. It is more clear, but it's less gun. It's like the guns are trying to be careful around a souffle. It's also more noticeable because this time around, Dark Athena is way more of a traditional FPS. There are still a few dedicated sneaking or platforming sections and a few areas where you do have the choice, but with how much tighter the level design is, you're in straight up combat a lot more. It does explain the faster movement, but there have been a few other changes and additions as well. Like in Butcher Bay, you could choose to lean and peek around cover, or do this roll move that I never used because it was fucking weird. Now there's an automatic cover system. If you push on a surface, Riddick will try to put the gun around it. There have been games where this works well, and there have been games where this is a dice roll. Looking at it, you can guess which one Dark Athena is. You have to be extremely precise with how far away you are from a surface, and your gun will snap around while you do that. In cases like the clip here, you're almost out in the open, but the gun will still snap to the pillar sometimes. If you get too close to a surface, Riddick might pull the gun up to his chest. So what usually happens is you get near a surface and then end up in the animation roulette wheel for a while. It is handy when you get the angle, but it takes fiddling to get there compared to just having a lean button. And this assumes the gun model isn't just vanishing sometimes. It adds onto the ice shine as an extra layer of the game is deciding this action for you. And when it's being a pain in the ass, it's really stinging. Like here, I just want to explode the bad man, but if I move my mouse too far down, it then goes into the cover mode. I really have to fiddle for the angle, but there we go. I'm not a fan of this change. The magazine system is also gone, so if bullet low, reload. With how the balance has changed, it's not a huge deal, but what does suck is the weapon wheel. Where once every weapon had a hotkey, now they encourage you to open the wheel, because this time around you can only bind 2 weapons, including melee. So if you quick bind for an action sequence, then go back into stealth, you have to rebind things to be able to do stealth takedowns. This is pretty annoying, especially since Dark Athena added weapons on top of the old roster. And sure, you can still manually cycle through them, but it's going to take some time. As for the new guns, the new SMG is absolutely awful. The range and spread is bad, and the caliber is practically airsoft. I can only guess this kept getting tweaked to not overshadow the assault rifle or the shotgun, and now it lives in the most useless gun netherworld. Shooting it does look cool until you see how long it takes to drop an enemy. Then you start avoiding it. The laser sniper rifle is great and complements the rest of your guns. It's fun to use, and the ragdoll chaos it causes is great. The issue here is the rest of the game around it. A good chunk of the game is in narrow hallways and tight rooms. They can be narrow, but you typically have a lot of room downrange. Even some of the larger environments have enemies fairly exposed. If things do get cramped, it's still fine for no-scoping. So in short, if you've got the ammo, this gun will rock their shit. So you only get it in the last 5% of the game, and only if you do a side quest. Which sounds like it would make sense, you know, a big power weapon at the end of the game, but it's not really that. Which brings us to the Scar. I still can't fully wrap my brain around this thing. It's not often I give that much attention to a single weapon in a game, but this one made a good case for it. It can completely change how you play the last third of the game, because unfortunately, it's not a weapon you can ignore.
God damn, you're ugly! I don't do business with fucks like you, man!
When you first hear about it, you might think that it's a Scar like an assault rifle. No. They claim it's not meant to be a weapon, but a mining tool. And after using it, the colonists might have been trying to dig to the center of the planet. It has unlimited ammo and can shoot out 5 detonatable sticky grenades at a time. It's one shot, one kill on most regular enemies, which is already intense, but the game is always pushing you into using it, like with the alpha drones. These guys are the biggest ones, made from piles of Frankenstein corpses. The only way to kill them is using the scar to stun them, and then move in closer to finish them off in melee. No other weapon can stun them down, including the sniper rifle. These aren't like 2 or 3 mini-bosses either, you start encountering them a good amount. Only the scar can take down a big enemy, fair enough, but it's also extremely effective on the spider robots. They're tiny, more durable than you would think, have long range, and will kill you extremely quickly. Most of your weapons don't cut it because you have to get too close or you waste too much ammo at range. Then you compare that to the unlimited ammo pinpoint accurate explosive launcher. Unlike the alpha drone, other weapons can technically work, but that'd be like saying Riddick technically has ghost goggles and is after the time splitters. There's an argument in there, but it's not right. You'll get hurt or die in moments otherwise. The spiders are meant for scar peekaboo. There are multiple obstacles that only the scar can break, and if that's not enough, it can also be used for physics puzzles. Gotta dog walk that box over there. Actually, the sniper rifle's side quest has you backtracking through an empty town trying to find things to break with it. On one hand, it's bad because you played through this area, you're breaking jammers and no new enemies spawn in or anything like that, but if you think about it, if you got this quest earlier, it would be another reason to push you into using the scar. Which everything else is already screaming at you to do, and let me remind you, you have 2 weapons you can bind. If you're trying to avoid it, you'll still have to keep opening it back up to progress. And the worst part is, all of this could be understandable if the thing was fun to use. It's interesting to use at first, but then you're shoved into it constantly, and every fight with it feels like the same thing.
Special. Let's see you deal with this.
It's the fact there's no ammo management or other options. This is it. The sneaking, the conversations, the fighting. Everything else fits so perfectly for the character and the tone that this really sticks out. Riddick is the ultimate improviser. While I have been harping on some changes, the game has some fantastic sections for that. Like, you go through Great Value Strogg most of the game and Riddick can turn their weapons against them, but there are points when you get to control the drones themselves. You gun down squads of pirates who are trying to enter your corpse remote playroom without a warrant. If you lose one, there are others on backup. Actually, Riddick is counting on it. Because some aren't destined to fight, they're doomed to be thrown into machinery that gets in your way. There's a section where you bait a power armor soldier into falling down a shaft so Riddick can ambush him and steal it for himself. It gives you a way better sense of power than the Butcher Bay version, and it also gives you a few more set pieces in it since you're not walking through the end of the game. To even get it, you have a boss fight, but now it's even more horribly damaged, and then the crew is taking turns trying to threaten or bargain with him.
We know it's you, Riddick. Step out of the mech and we might give you a chance.
You find a repair station to fix it up and rearm it, and now you have rockets. Which is good because you're now fighting other mechs on the surface of the ship. And you're catching all these details, like them loading up the gas canisters they're shelling the planet with, or seeing weird room orientations and people walking on different planes. It's such a fun, great section, and it's like that because it sticks around just long enough and stops before it gets old. Riddick's not married to it.
A mech should be worth a few laughs.
And he's right. There are tiny memorable sections like the fight around the ship's gravity core. Yeah, it's more of a straightforward action game, but it kept throwing new things at you, even if they were tiny. It has good, exciting pacing right up until you get the scar, and with that it's still interesting at first because it's a new toy, but then all the new introductions revolve around it. I don't like the SMG, but it didn't become the SMG game. At the end of the day, him relying on this explosive mining tool is just weird. Like, there's a world where there's a whole other game built around this thing. And I don't want to make it sound like the last third is only using it. There are parts where you can still use your old arsenal or choose whether to fight or sneak, but it is distracting how often they pull you back to it. Right, Melee's gone through some changes too. That's definitely worth talking about. Melee combat seems to have changed to make it more understandable, but it's actually tricky in a different way now. You still have full body awareness, but you no longer have to watch out for if your hands are open or your weapon has gone down to counter. Now when you can, your weapon just flashes. That does sound like simplifying it down and making it brainless, but there's more to it. The window of reaction time on this can be incredibly tight, way more so than before. On top of that, different weapons, or maybe different enemies, don't always behave consistently in it. For some, you see the flash, hit the button, and you're good, but the oolocks can be tricky at times. Riddick's melee animations are also sped up, but so are the enemies. Sometimes, by the time you see the flash, it's already too late. So what you might end up doing is the same thing as before. You watch out for the arms moving or the animation changing slightly, and then you hit it. The actual counter window is often slightly before the actual flash. I don't hit the button when the blade senses orcs nearby, I hit it here when the blades start to turn because the flash is coming. So underneath, it's similar to the previous system, but now enemies attack way faster. What's odd is that in the remake, countering can be stupidly reliable. Here the dude's punch animation hadn't gone up yet, Riddick just grabs him and beats the shit out of him. Then you have Rust, who attacks faster and more aggressively, but is easier to stunlock. It doesn't feel more reliable to me, it feels more like an attack has a better chance of becoming a counter. There were polish issues before, it was janky, but I could figure it out. Dark Athena's looks and can feel a lot more slick, but different weapons having different timings for the flash makes it quirkier in a way it wasn't before. It does feel like a higher floor but a lower ceiling for what you can do in it, but I almost wish they hadn't touched that old system much beyond just polishing it. All the sliding models and seeing through your arms stuff.
Scared, huh?
There's the same general bugginess as before, though I did run into some bad ones like getting stuck. And when it comes to enemy AI, it's hard to tell what is a bug. Like melee combat, their detection speed has also gone up, sometimes attacking about the second they notice you. They don't have the what's that state of stealth and go right into attacking, which is more real but also pushes you more towards the action gameplay. Which, when it does come to guns, is alright, and it was alright in Butcher Bay as well, but there they were good at pacing it across shorter sections, so aiming feeling a bit floaty or other flaws weren't as important. They were FPS sections in a bigger game. In Dark Athena, you're seeing those flaws a lot more often, especially when it comes to the enemy AI. It's also disjointed because now when it comes to being sneaky beaky, they can turn around at super speed, but in a proper fight they might freeze up or run away to a faraway cover point that makes no sense. I don't know, it's a kind of headless chicken element to the fights that's hard to word. It doesn't always happen, but when it does, it either makes the fight funny or awkward and unsatisfying. It doesn't feel like AI overhauled for this kind of shooter, but the old AI with some faster reaction time. And a lot of that reaction will be to run to cover no matter what. It's another consequence of it really being a glorified expansion pack. They weren't completely reworked from the ground up for a tighter game, they've just had some tweaks and adjustments that seem super context sensitive and can and will break on you. Also, the collectibles are now bounties instead of cigarettes. I'm not sure if each developer chose their crime for these, but there are some thinkers. This man attempted genocide and it's still less than Riddick's bounty. The more I look, the more I need to see his entire rap sheet. As for the story, it's even more straightforward than Butcher Bay. It does leave a lot open or unexplained and does give some insights into Riddick, but it's also a lot more meandering. I think there are a few interesting bits, so if you don't want spoilers, go to here.
We have a breach!
Okay, we went from escape the prison to escape the ship. Except where he once had a romp meeting a bunch of people whittling it down to a few, there are fewer characters this round and not necessarily more developed, you might just hear more of their backstories. The performances are still good, but there are few actually interesting characters. Like little girl, whose father was droned and her mother imprisoned, and you get to know Mom a little bit, but her main purpose is giving you a vent tool. It's like Butcher Bay where the characters and little side quests are just a means to help Riddick escape, but you can have much longer conversations with them now. It sounds like it should be a big improvement, but I don't think it adds that much beyond some insight into the setting and their backstories. And you know most of these people aren't going to last long. Plus you don't get a ton of opportunity to play off the conversations, it's a lot of exposition. There are exceptions like Jailer, who was once part of the ship's crew until Revis had him thrown in the brig. He spends most of his time plotting revenge, but he does give you insight on the things you are curious about. The ship, the drones, what the deal with Revis is, and the entire time he's unhinged, raving, planning to have his way with the girl's mother when the bars come down. He's an asshole, but you do have to deal with him to make progress, which is an interesting dynamic. Also, Revis imprisoned him, but he still respects her.
Revis?
Revis.
Yeah, she grew up in the slums there. Skirt's got balls. She fears nothing, man. Nothing.
Lance Henriksen's a grizzled Marine with the technical know-how to help you escape, but honestly, if it wasn't for who was voicing him, he'd be forgettable too.
This is a slave ship. I don't think they give a damn.
It makes sense, but it also doesn't help they're all in the same room, so most of their screen time is just bouncing between them for conversations. It seems like it'll pick up when the jailbreak happens because now they'll all be loose with each other, and some do have scores to settle.
You killed Sad-Eyed Blue-Skin Brothers, bitch! You wait till she gets out of here, wait!
Fuck you! You're just a fucking pussy, Riddick!
I will say that Jailer runs laps around Exhibit. You have more insight into who he is, he's got a big personality, and before you duel him, he got Space Mom, right in front of her child.
Riddick!
You like that, pussy? Tell you what, you put away your gun, and we'll do this like real men.
Yeah, sure. Jailer wants the honor fight now. You do get an achievement if you actually humor that. But now, Riddick needs to comfort a crying little girl. We've never seen this kind of side of him before.
Mommy? Is Mommy asleep, Riddick? Is she asleep?
No. She's at peace.
This might be one of the most normal interactions he's had with someone.
That monster's gonna be with you till the day you die. Don't be afraid of it. In time you'll understand how to use it. Control it. Harness it.
Holy shit, I love Riddick.
I can be a monster too.
Be my apprentice. With his kind of upbringing, he sees the weak bite it all the time. So as ridiculous as this scene can be, it's still the most genuine, honest advice he has. It's how he's survived, and he doesn't mince words about it. Riddick has met good, selfless people, and in his line of work, they end up dead. So you can understand his attitude. We get more tiny bits of what makes him tick, and while he doesn't harp on it long, ghost drones are deeply disturbing to him. Up until now, he thought the rules were simple.
Nobody wants to die, but everybody gets to.
Not with the ingenuity of our nightmare future. Seeing people harvested into drones shatters that.
She's created some unholy fusion between flesh and technology. A body that is willing, and a mind that's controlled. It's all wrong. The dead should stay dead.
It adds an extra layer to his distaste of necromongers, who are already bending that rule like Saul Goodman. Beyond every other strange thing that made him end up as the Lord Marshal, it's now established their entire culture goes against one of his core and only philosophies. It is Riddick, his code isn't that complicated. Besides, if the drones creep him out, who knows what things like the Quasi-Dead or the Lensers make him feel. Though, really, you probably don't have to dig too deep for that answer. He comments on how once monks used Zulaks to defend honor, and even prays, though it is a Riddick vengeance prayer, before the final battle. Him being spiritual isn't new either, but it's the most we've gotten since Pitch Black.
It is painless.
It's pointless.
Because you do not believe in God. Does not mean God does not believe
Think
in
someone
you.
can spend half their life in a slam, with a horse bit in their mouth and not believe? Think he could start out in some liquor store trash bin with an umbilical cord wrapped around his neck and not believe? Got it all wrong, holy man. I absolutely believe in God. And I absolutely hate the fucker.
He is with us nonetheless.
It is easy to dismiss him as an edgelord, whose kryptonite is department store lighting, but there is depth to him if you're looking for it. He accepts death as part of life, but what's beyond that or twists that rule does bother him. The drone host bodies are actually dead when they're puppeted around, right? Who knows? He doesn't want to. Revis has made tons of the things, and while you don't get much of her on screen like Hoxie, you do have the pieces to understand her. It also makes her the second Star Trek actor villain, but I would bet they cast her after seeing her as the Pegasus captain in Battlestar. She's a similar kind of hard-ass. She grew up poor and desperate, doing anything it takes to survive. As captain, she has the exact same mindset and bounces between carrot and stick. Almost literally too, as she's known to reward crew members by sleeping with them. If they piss her off, they're being imprisoned or droned. She doesn't care about the method difference, only that it gets a result.
Oh, just give it up, hon. You know that sooner or later I'll get you. We could have such a good time together.
We're gonna have ourselves a time, Rose.
One moment and she wants everybody to kill him, then she gets in the comms with him and tries to seduce him. It explains why she has such a fascination making drones. With them, she doesn't have to do manipulation or theatrics, they just do what they're told. And she'll use whatever she can to keep her power and legacy. When you face off against her in hand-to-hand combat, it doesn't take long to bring her down. Riddick has escaped the Dark Athena and leaves the child behind. This part leads to the great tire spinning. Because she's not dead, knocks his escape pod out of orbit, and the last third of the game is on Aguirre Prime, where the Dark Athena lands to harvest more drones, and you spend the entire time fighting to get back to the ship. It definitely feels like that fight could have been the final point in the expansion, because then it's a strangely quieter stretch until you get back to the ship, and when you do, the game wraps up fast. The child says her mom taught her how to hack all of the drones, and now they're all turning against the crew. There's no more explanation than that. I guess you also kill her second in command in a brief boss fight, but I guess he's the real exhibit too. His name was Spinner or Wheeler, I'm not going to double check. The drone uprising is cool and thematic, but it's super brief. I mean, you fight alongside them for a single room brief. Then you control an alpha for a while, but that's been the whole game, honestly. And like that, final boss, when you've basically just gotten back on the ship. As for the fight, you know what it's gonna be. You get the idea.
It didn't have to be this way.
You know what? It doesn't fucking matter anyway. Just don't forget me.
Came from nothing, back to nothing. It is what it is.
If you're used to living hard, Revis, then dying should come easy.
Is she coming back?
When I say goodbye, it's forever.
It's an abrupt fizzle, but it's fine. But what happens to the kid? And what about John's? When in doubt, pitch black DVD extras.
I got some distance between us and Butcher Bay and Hoxie's ship before Riddick dosed me and left me for dead. It's lucky I don't die easy.
He slept through the whole thing, woke up somewhere strange, and thought Riddick did it. That's pretty hilarious, but as for the girl, it might not have been a random child that Johns uses later, but I don't think it's ever confirmed. Maybe one day if there's ever a third game. It's not a bad story, but is absolutely stretched way too thin. The last third drags on way too long, and then it's all wrapped up in about 15 minutes or so. There's a perfect point for the events at the end of the game to happen earlier. Instead, a big chunk of game was sandwiched in that does stick out from the rest of the flow. When you were done back in the day, you could play multiplayer. There's a pitch black mode where it's basically like Halo Juggernaut, except it's a dark map and only one player gets to be Riddick and have the night vision. It sounds fun, but it's gonna be hard to get a game going. Man, Dark Athena. If you liked Butcher Bay, it's definitely worth a playthrough. It has some fun sections and smaller moments too to make it worth it, but the entire thing is bogged down by little annoyances, intentional and not. A good amount could be tweaked or fixed to make it more enjoyable, but compared to Butcher Bay, it's lacking a lot of that atmosphere. It doesn't have that exploration focus, there aren't nearly as many side quests or little things to find and do. It's weird to feel more boxed in than the prison game. Plus, with a darker color scheme and lack of characters, it is missing some of that charm too.
I'm fucking shielded, you idiot!
It's not great, but it's still mainly good. It kind of feels like if Fear 2 was a better follow-up. I kept thinking of it, could have just been the color scheme. It could have worked better as an expansion, but most of that was out of their hands due to business dealings. But this is what we got. Who knows, maybe the third game will come with a Dark Athena remake. But until then, that's the end of Riddick games. Unless you have the iPad game, or Fallout Tactics. That's it for now, until next round. I recently got the first Dune book. How many of the books would you recommend someone read? Oh boy. I think it's fairly agreed that Dune, Dune Messiah, and Children of Dune are safe, you know, the first three. I love God Emperor of Dune, but that one starts to get off the range. Heretics of Dune starts becoming a hentai, and I forget most of Chapter House. The golden rule is to avoid Brian Herbert stuff. His interpretation of the Butlerian Jihad is insanely stupid. There's the Harkonnen fat virus and... oh god, don't get me started. Have I played any other Tygon games? For reference, that's Vin Diesel's game studio. I did play some of Wheelman, and I remember parts of it being ambitious for a racing game, but that memory is so fuzzy, I cannot remember if it was fun or not. What's a weird obscure media that was stuck in my head after seeing it? You've all seen some games already, so for movies, Virus and Peter Benchley's Creature. Savage Land I saw recently, and I loved that. It's hard to think of what an obscure book might be, but maybe Shade's Children? Or The High Crusade, though I read both of those a long time ago. Honestly, I do need to catch up on some reading.
Oh yeah, we'll do it again, and let him this time analyze your mind like that guy Sigmund Freud.
Sigmund who?